thanks guys for coming. We appreciate it. How not to install a steering column and other useful tips. We'll not just show you how not to, but hopefully give you some tips on how to do it as well. Like I said, my name is Marty Waterstrout. With me today is George Sears, and spend a little time. And this is a small group, obviously. If you got any questions, just holler out. I'll stop it a few times along the way, but with a group this small, it's not going to be real formal. So, for anybody that doesn't know, and some of you do, but a real brief history of the company of IDIDIT. Ken Callison founded the company. Back in the 60s, he was a machinist in the Navy and managed to get lucky enough to miss Vietnam. Got married, came back home. Like a lot of guys in the Detroit area, ended up working for one of the big three. In his case, it was for Ford. But he always liked machining, and so he had a little lathe in his garage, and he had a mill there, and so he started making little parts and taking them to swap meets and stuff. And one day, a guy in his car club said, "Hey, can you make me a billet aluminum steering column?" He's like, I don't know. I guess I can give it a shot. So he made one. That was in about 1984 or 5, and that guy took it to a car show, and 2 other people saw it, and they wanted them, and then 4 and 8, you know. From this one guy asking, it turned into a pretty big business. So the original shop was actually their garage, and then they built a little pole barn beside the garage. I don't know if this pointer is going to work that far. Anyway, they outgrew the pole barn pretty quickly, and they moved into the shop in Clinton, Michigan on US 12. That was about 3,500 square feet. That was a big deal because they had their first showroom, and they had their first car shows there. And after about 4 years, they outgrew that. So they moved down to Tecumseh Clinton Road, and that was 10,000 square feet. And they were there for 4 years. And they were kind of landlocked. The guy that owned the property around them literally owned it all the way around their property. And they couldn't expand any. So then we bought the current facility in Tecumseh, Michigan. It's about 32,000 square feet. Hard to see in that picture, but it started out as a really ugly brown building, just an old factory. And they put a lot of money and work into it. It's a pretty cool building now, inside and out. We have a large showroom. We have a larger manufacturing facility, offices, conference rooms. Big break room. It's a good place to work. A lot of growth, a lot of success for the company, and it's good to work for somebody that's that successful. It's just fun to be with. There is a right way and a wrong way to do pretty much anything, and with steering, the right way usually equates to safety, and that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is making sure that the car that you're building or working on is safe. Doesn't matter if you're building a car or a house, you do it wrong, disaster can happen. The picture of the car, we actually had a little contest at work. Which caption were we going to use? So this one guy came up with, "Let's go racing," you said. "It'll be fun," you said. And he has no front end left on his car. I don't know where that picture came from originally, but I just found it on the internet, thought it was kind of cool, and it kind of fits our thing here today. If you don't do it the right way, bad things can definitely happen to you. So we have some examples of do this, don't do that in our seminar. Not a big crowd, so this maybe is a good thing. If you see your car on there and it's one of the examples of don't do it, just don't tell me. Is that the next one? Oh, it is. Okay. This is actually a display that's in our showroom, and it's a dash of a 55 Ford truck. And if you see on the left, you've got a really nice billet aluminum column drop securing the column from the dash, and we've got a good secure mount at the firewall, or in this case down at the toe board, holding the column in place. We always want the column held in 2 places. Make it good and secure. The one on the right, like I said in the caption, we wouldn't have done this, and obviously we created this, but I've actually seen this. I saw a street rod at a car show who was holding his column up with a coat hanger. So that's what we did. Obviously not a good way to do it. He had no floor mount. He had a Mustang box mounted right outside the firewall on his hot rod, and the column went directly into the box with a rag joint. He says they thought that was secure enough and would hold it. The other thing is the rag joint was deflected at probably about a 5-degree angle, which is also dangerous. It's a good way to tear out the rag joint, and you lose your steering. So a couple of examples there of one way to do it and one way not to do it. Again, the one on the left, a good secure mount. This guy welded a steel drop to our column, which is perfectly acceptable. People do that on our columns all the time. A safety tip, if you're going to weld to our column or anybody else's steering column, do not ground to the center shaft. We've had a lot of people do that, and if you know anything about welding, what that does is creates a flow of current that's going all the way through the column, in and out, around and around and around, and you'll melt the pivot ball inside the column that actually where it tilts. You could melt the wiring, you can melt all kinds of things. This guy, for the lower mount, he welded 2 little L brackets down there. You can't even see them. He's got them down underneath the carpeting but just 2 little L brackets welded to the end of the tube and then bolted to the firewall. So he can still take it off if he needs to. Just made it really clean. The one on the right, here we've got a stock GM column, still used in street rods all over the country. It's the way a lot of guys still do it. But he made some kind of a homemade mount, and he had it going around a plastic part of the outer shell of the column. So all he's mounted to is a plastic sleeve. Again, not a good way to do it, and he had no mount at the firewall. It was just kind of hanging in there by that one under dash mount, and again, mounting on plastic. Another good example, I think that's a Mullins, or in this case now it's Borgeson, drop with one of our swivel ball floor mounts down on the firewall. Nice and clean, solid, not going anywhere. The one on the right, you've got another stock GM column, my COMET, nice towel. That's what he's got. He's got a towel wrapped around there. The GM columns work. They're not pretty. You see guys go to great lengths sometimes to upholster around them and do all that. That's fine, but he literally had a towel wrapped around his. And the towel was wrapped around the actual ignition switch and was kind of mushed up against it with bare terminals. Again, just not a good way to do things. Here's something that a lot of people do, and I got to do this. If you've ever seen a column with a 1-inch double D shaft, which I apologize, I don't have one here right now, guys will take a piece of 3/4 DD shaft and shove it up inside that 1-inch DD hollow tube. We definitely do not recommend that. What happened to that picture? It's bent. It can literally wallow out the 1-inch DD tube from the constant turning back and forth, back and forth. I've seen guys put a big bolt through it because there's a hole in the DD shaft, so sure, we'll just drill a hole. Now you've drilled a 3/8 hole in a 3/4 shaft and you've got half your material left. Again, not a good way to do things. What we recommend that you do is what we show on the left. And I've got one here. I've got a coupler that fits over the outside of the DD shaft, and then this slides up inside of it. It's much safer. You don't have to worry about, losing your steering because the inside of your shaft opened up, and now your DD shaft, your small one, is slipping around inside of there. And these are things that we honestly see all the time. That is a plastic composite material at the bottom. The bushing is called Delrin. I wouldn't weld that close to the Delrin. You're going to ruin the bushing. George, you did not tell me about... Man. We're going to back up. Trivia questions. Because almost everybody here is going to win something. I don't... How many of you are familiar? How many of you are not familiar with the company IDIDIT? Hadn't heard of it before you came here? Nobody. So you've at least heard of it. Okay. Down in the bottom left-hand corner is Ken and Jane Callison standing in front of their 48 Ford panel truck. Does anybody know the name of that truck? Because they named it. That truck has been all over the country. It's been to Colorado. It's been to California. It's been everywhere. Nope. Nobody? It's big. It's green. It's big and green and kind of round. If it was striped and had seeds, it'd be easier to identify. Yes. Give the man a hat. Yes, that is the watermelon. And it's been sitting in their garage for years. We've got a brand new TCI frame sitting in our showroom. I really wish they would get it underneath that truck someday. Okay. Sorry about that. We're really prepared for this, huh?
Going back to that picture, too, not only welding it is a bad idea, but people take a sledgehammer and pound that up in and do damage to the interior.
Yeah, I had to get one of our really, really old columns to even fit this up in here. We made our new DD shafts a smaller ID, so you can't put it in there. But they still do it. They just literally will grab a hold of a hammer and pound their shaft up inside of it, which could unseat the bearings. It could do all kinds of bad things inside the column, so definitely don't do that. Okay, when you're installing a column, yeah, you want it safe. That's the number one thing, but comfort's really important too. So how do you decide where you're going to install your steering column? We get phone calls. We get a lot of phone calls. Some of the phone calls, you want to tell the guy to put the wrench down and back away from his car. We get those guys almost once a day. Anybody that's ever been on the phone or dealt with the public probably can appreciate that. But people will say, well, how do I decide where I'm going to install my column in my car? If you got a 67 Camaro, it's easy. It's going to bolt in where the old one came out. That's a no-brainer. If you're building a 32 Ford or whatever that one happens to be, we tell people, one, we want you to measure, but we know pretty much what fits just from years of experience. but have the actual seats that you're going to be sitting in when you're driving the car, have them installed in the car when you're doing this. So you're sitting in the car, here's your car, and just hold your hands out and go, okay, I'm comfortable about right here. So that's where you want your steering wheel to be. I don't know how many of you have been in a street rod where the column is crooked like this because they had to miss the brake pedal. Guys used to do that a lot. It might be a quick, easy fix to get it on your brake pedal, but if you're driving at any distance at all, after a while it gets really uncomfortable. So you want to center the column in the seat behind the driver. You want to make sure the column is straight. You want to make sure everything is lined up and that you're comfortable in it because you're the one that's going to be driving it. Now sometimes it's hard to get from point A to point B in a straight line. Oh, that's right, we stuck this in here. Trivia question number 2. Oops. That's the question. What the hell is that? That's something from Ford Motor Company that they actually produced in Pintos. There's one that I can show you right there. No, and I don't know why this isn't reaching. Sorry about the camera, but it's not reaching over there, is it? I don't see it. It is a Pinto flex shaft. And Ford decided that was a good idea. Instead of using U-joints, you just have the cable. It could bend from the end of the steering column to the rack and pinion. It was a flexible shaft. They brought it out 1 year. They ended it mid-year. They frayed. They rusted. Bad news. And people used them on their street rods. In theory, it's a good idea. You can just bend it around things. But theory doesn't always work. Who said it was a cable drive? Did you already win a hat, or did he win the hat? I don't know. I knew Pinto did. I didn't know Jaguar ever did. Yeah? I've seen a few at street rod shows. It's funny because when Ken was going around taking some of these pictures, and some of these are literally years old, but I have seen one of those fairly recently. He went up to one guy's car, and he would always ask, can I take a picture of your car? And the guy's like, why? He goes, well, I'm interested in, steering. And he had on the IDIDIT shirt, so the guy knew who he was anyway. And he says, I know why you want to take a picture of my car. He goes, I didn't do this stuff right. He's like, well, yeah, that's kind of what I was looking at. He goes, okay, go ahead. Just don't take a picture of the whole car. Just take a picture of this little part of it. So anyway, like I said, it's hard to get from point A to point B sometimes. The top picture there on the left has the column at almost a horizontal, which is closer to what new cars are like. And a lot of guys will want to try and do that. But you come out of the firewall and you could run into the back of your head if you got a big wide engine like an LS or a Hemi or whatever. You might run into headers. And the result is, if you look at the picture on the top right, he came out of there and immediately dropped straight down with a double U-joint. He's got a fairly elaborate support system there with a welded bar with 2 Heim joints in there. I don't know if you can tell or not, but if you look at that top Heim joint, he cut a good chunk of it away so his header would clear. I don't know how much support it's really given him or not, but again, a good example of what not to do. If he'd have brought it down lower in the firewall, he could have eliminated all that and come out and probably gone right into his box with a couple of U-joints, like a more typical setup. Now the one on the bottom, the opposite thing, if you come down too steep, it's kind of obvious. It's hard to get from the bottom of the column into that Vega box without having a couple of real steep angles on a U-joint. And I showed that same column we showed earlier because it was mounted at a pretty steep angle, kind of like driving a bus. You're sitting in here like this, and you got the big bus wheel. And so what if you can't get from the steering wheel to what you want to get to in a straight line? There are other options. We have our shorty column. Our shorty columns, the one that's in there is a 16-inch tilt column. That's the overall length of it. I don't know how many years ago. I've been there 15 years, probably 10 or 12 years ago. One of our dealers in Michigan kept calling up ordering custom length columns. He'd order a 16, he'd order an 18, he'd order a 12 or whatever. Finally called him up and said, Frank, what are you doing? Nobody puts columns in this size. Everybody puts in 28s, 30s, 32s. He said, well, look at a lot of your late model cars. They've got these little bitty short columns, and then there's a U-joint and a shaft going through the firewall. And he's right. I looked at my daughter's Mercury. It was the same way. So, like I said, we want 2 secure mounts. In this case, he's got 2 column drops hanging it, which is perfectly acceptable. You drop a U-joint or double U-joint off of there, and you can take a 3/4 shaft through the firewall wherever it's convenient for you to do so. You get through the firewall, you put it's called flange bearing. Let me get them from you. Yeah. Well, the flange bearing is what we put on the firewall. And then use a pillow block or a Heim joint or whatever on the outside and go into your Vega box or your rack and pinion or whatever you're using. It's a good solid setup. It's very secure. It's very safe. And you've eliminated clearance issues. That's a great setup in a Model A. It's a great setup in any like pre-World War II pickup, 40s and older. Anytime where space is a problem. Now the picture at the bottom, we've got one up here on the table. It's called a steer clear. We've known this guy for a long time because we make the shafts that go in that box for him. It's another way to do it. Instead of having a bunch of U-joints and shafting, like it shows in the bottom picture down there, you can go straight into it with a universal joint. You can drop down anywhere from 8 to 16 inches and it comes out the opposite side. Kind of a neat deal. Now, I am obligated to tell you that NSRA does not approve that part. You'll never pass an NSRA safety inspection with one of those in your car. We think it's safe or we wouldn't sell it. It's got a chain inside. They won't approve anything for steering with a chain. It's a timing chain. It's got guides in it and tensioners to keep the tension. I think of an engine with all the stress, I mean, that's never going to be turning at 4,000, 5,000 RPMs. All you're doing is just doing this back and forth. I can't imagine it would ever loosen up or break. I just, like I said, we tore them all apart. We wouldn't sell it if we weren't satisfied that it's a safe product. We really like them. Not something everybody needs, but it's a great problem solver if you do. Like that one's $700, so maybe not everybody wants to go that route, but it is a really neat system. Are there any questions about any of this stuff before we move on to anything else? This is kind of a brief how to do it and how not to do it thing. Should we tell them the inside joke about this or just let it go? No, this isn't the new part. That's the hot part. I'm going to let George talk to you about what's new at IDIDIT, some of the newer products that we've got out. I wish we could have brought some of them with us. We do have one, but we'll have some of them in our booth at the show, so make sure to stop by.
Hi, my name's George, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm not used to talking in front of big crowds, so if I seem a little nervous, I apologize. But what's new at IDIDIT? We've got a 64 to 65 Ford Falcon. Everybody's been asking for those, so we listened, and we've got those out. And this is the worldwide premiere, as far as I understand. These are now available, aren't they?
That's it.
Yeah, this is it.
You're the first ones to ever hear this.
First one to know about it. So again, it comes with the 8-position tilt, which is exclusive to IDIDIT columns. Yeah, you just. No. We've got Mustang columns, trucks, things like that. The one here, the 69 Mustang column here on the table.
It's all Ford guts inside.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people have been using the Mustang columns to try to fit them into their Falcons, which you have to do a lot of fabrication. This is exclusive for the 64, 65. Like I said, it has the exclusive 8-position tilt. The Ford top shaft, it's a year-specific wheel, so 64, 65 Falcon wheel will fit on it. Ford wiring, plug right into your aftermarket wiring harness, or original. Comes with a floor mount, exclusive for that year. The dress-up kits, turn signal levers, tilt lever. You can get it in a floor shift or a column shift.
That's a first.
Yeah. And a 3/4 36 output shaft, so you need a coupler to couple it to your original box or the components to put it to a rack. And again, it's available in all the paintable steel, chrome, and black powder coat. And the 65 Mercury COMET column. Pretty much the same, but subtle differences. The wiring, I believe, is a little bit different. The length is a little bit different. The way it hooks up under the dash is a little bit different. Again, the 8-position tilt, Ford top shaft, Ford wiring, everything. Comes with the floor mount, dress-up kit, and the same output shaft. Now, this one is only available in a floor mount because the column shift, the shifter will hit the dashboard. So it's only available in the floor shifting.
Something?
You may.
Okay. We weren't looking to do a Mercury Comet column because we don't get calls every day for Mercury Comets. But a guy just said, here, prototype a column for my car. He was right there local. We don't need to try and pass up that opportunity, and we hope to do the same with the Falcon, but it wasn't. So.
Now, I want to add, too, that these are the 65 Mercury and the 64, 65 Falcon are specific for those years. A lot of people will call up and say, well, will that fit in my 66 or an off year? It might. We don't know. We designed it for that specific year. We will probably be making other years as the time goes on, but for now, we know that it'll fit those model years. We don't know if it'll fit anything other than a 64, 65. The Chrysler B body, that's been out for a while now, but we've been getting good response with it. 67, 69 Chrysler B bodies. Yeah. Again, the 8-position tilt, exclusive to IDIDIT, fully collapsible column. It has a GM top shaft, so you won't be able to use your original wheel. Have to use an aftermarket wheel. Yeah. Year-specific wiring harness, you get that with each column. Provisions for the mounting brackets, you can see on the side of the column there, there's welded tabs and things to hook up under your dash. Comes with a floor mount, the dress-up kits, and it has a 3/4 double D extendable shaft. So you can hook up to a power box or a manual box. Again, all the popular colors and finishes. Now this is the part, what's How Did I Did It? Besides us.
That was going on a lot of work.
We're going to flex at this point, but I think we'll pass on that.
Yeah, there's no girls in the audience.
First-gen Camaros, those have been real popular. One of our best sellers is the 67, 68 Camaro. We have the 69 Camaro, retrofit, slides right in, real popular. 69 comes with ignition just like the factory. Mustangs, you can see the 69 Mustang here. We only go to 69 on the Mustangs. We've been getting a lot of calls for the 70s, so that may be down the line a little bit, coming out with something like that.
Ford key switch.
Ford, yeah. We also have them for Mustangs for the rack. If you have a rack, let us know. Different size columns, an inch shorter, so it'll fit your rack. And the Chevy, Ford, and trucks. Here you can see this Camaro column and the Ford Mustang. We've got them up to 69. We're just showing that one. Chevy trucks and Ford trucks. Now the Chevy trucks, we go from 47 to 78. The Ford trucks, we go from 53 to 56, jump over the 57 to 64s because not real popular trucks, and we go from 65 up to 79. Just basically what we fit, all of our other retrofit columns, 55, Tri-5 Chevys, Camaros, Firebirds. The 69 Firebird, if you have the ignition in it, it may not work with our column because Pontiac went its own way in 69 and 70 with their ignitions, which will not match up to our ignition, so you had to change over to like an MSD or something to make it work with our column. Second-gen Camaros, the Chevelle, El Caminos, Vettes, Impalas, El Caminos, and Novas. And then you can see the 70 to 75 CUDA challenge. And Universal, do you want to take over on the Universals? Or?
Sure. This is where it all started with IDIDIT. It was the universal columns, just a plain tilt column. I mean, that was, like I said, 27 years ago. That first column was a floor shift tilt model. We obviously now do non-tilts. The Classic's real popular. It's got a real thin 1 3/4 tube and a small head on it. It's really good in roadsters. We use that same column or a version of it in the first-gen Corvettes, the 53 through 62s. A lot of kit car manufacturers use a column like that from us for their Cobras, things like that. We do a straight column shift. The old school column, which I brought, and we have one sitting up over here, that's been real popular. That's just a real basic, bare bones, roadster kind of a column, no electronics. We do have a horn kit for it now, but one size fits all. You buy it, it's 36 inches, and then you as a customer cut it to the length you need. We ship it with the bearings, and it's all there. It's just the bearings aren't seated, so you just pull it apart and cut it, put it back together, and you're good to go. Oops, there it is. Most of our columns are available, like we said, in bare steel, which is the paintable version. When you pull it out of the box, it's a nice, pretty brushed finish. And a lot of people want to leave it that way. Unless you live in the desert, I don't recommend it because it's going to get all rusty within a short period of time. But we also do chrome columns, and we do the black powder coat. Man, is that growing. I think guys, that's the finish. It's a semi-gloss black finish. I think a lot of guys really like the idea of taking it out of the box, and it's ready to go. There's no painting to do. Just install it, and chrome isn't for everybody, so. Again, universals in a tilt with a shifter, without a shifter. We can add ignition. We also do our touch and go push button ignition. We'll have that in the booth if you want to stop by and take a look at that. all the same finishes. Billet aluminum. We don't do aluminum columns with a key, but anything else you can get in a brushed or polished aluminum as well. Tilt and tellies are a little bit different animal. We've done them for a long time. Year after year they contemplate dropping them, and year after year we decide we're going to keep it. The sales kind of stay the same. We do about one a week. And the size chart there is a little different. When we measure our columns, we're going to measure from here down to the end of the output shaft. Now, a tilt and telly column, you can't see this point. It's underneath the canister up there that goes up and down. So we measure them a little different. We measure right to the top of the flange where the steering wheel bolts on, which is that gap that you see up there near the top of the column. And that's in the fully collapsed position. I have no doubt I talk more people out of buying one of these columns than I talk them into it, because they'll call me up and say, I'm doing a Model A coupe and I want to put a tilt and telly in it, and I'll say, no, you don't. It's just too long. It's too long. It's going to stick out from the dash too far, and then it's going to telescope out longer. And most people that I talk to that want a telly column are trying to get the wheel away from them. It's the other way around. It's a long column to begin with, and then it telescopes out even further. And you know,
You get a lot of guys in the pickup truck and put them into.
yeah, another bad place to put it. But you know, the Cadillac tilt and telly, that was the best column you could put in a hot street rod for years and years and years. That's what you did. We do a lot of accessories. We brought some of them here with us. We've got a lot more in the booth. Pretty much anything that can attach to the steering column we have. We do steering wheel adapters for virtually every aftermarket wheel out there. We do column drops in a variety of lengths. Ken was the first one, Ken Callison, to do a hinged drop. It won an NSRA New Product of the Year award several years ago. We do column drops. We do shift indicators for 3- and 4-speed automatics for GM and Ford. We do a specific C4 and a C6 indicator. We do an AOD indicator. Dress-up kits, a variety of knobs, cable shift linkage kits. That's our swivel ball floor mount on the top right. We do a very inexpensive floor mount. Again, we've got some here on the table if you want to take a look at them. The swivel ball mount is definitely the higher end one. It's a nice billet aluminum mount. Doesn't matter how far you tip it, there's never any gap. If you get some of the other people's out there, it's not a complete ball. So if you tip that column, you start getting gaps at the bottom on the inside and a gap on the top at the outside. That one seals it up really nice. There's 2 rings on the inside that when they're beveled, when you tighten them down, they lock the ball into place. And we include a 3rd ring for the engine side of the firewall just to dress it up and kind of finish it off. In addition to that, back up. In addition to that, we offer options like cruise control. You can do a high-low beam switch on a column. You can do a wiper switch on the column. I can't do all 3 at once. I can do any combination of the two of the 3. So you can do cruise and dimmer, cruise and wiper, wiper and dimmer. We also do a lot of things that are not street rod related. Does anybody know what that little green toad of a car is up there? Because they're made in California. That is the Corbin Pacific Sparrow. And it's a little electric car. And they came to us. We don't do OE stuff. We're not going to work with Chrysler, Ford, GM. Chrysler actually came to them years ago and talked to them about a relative, for a small company anyway, a big contract. And they turned them down. A classic case of putting all your eggs in one basket, because if you take on all the new machinery and all the new employees to be able to keep up with what Chrysler wanted, and then 2 years later they say, oh, these guys are going to do it for $100 less. Sorry, see you later. They just decided not to go that route. But small productions, like things like that, will do. That little red and silver tow vehicle is from a company called Taylor Dunn. I've seen those at airports pulling baggage carts, little trains around. They put our chrome tilt columns in all of those little things. They don't want to have to paint them. So they just get a chrome one. I've also, Southwest Airlines, that little tube at the bottom, that's got bearings in each end with a 3/4 spline shaft in it. Southwest Airlines uses those in some of their support vehicles. The golf cart in the bottom right is a really tricked out golf cart. We sell quite a few golf cart columns still. The one in the middle, there's a company here in southeast Michigan called Roush. And most people know Roush for racing, but they do a lot of stuff not racing related. That column was one of their columns that we designed in conjunction with them for a driving simulator. And then they, in turn, build the driving simulators. They sell them to the government. They sell them to police departments. They sell them to driving schools, all kinds of different applications. Pretty much if it has front wheels or even pretends it has front wheels that steer, we can build a column for it. We've done a small OE run from a company out of South America for some trucks, things like that. So There's one that we said no to. It was a dump truck. No, not a dump truck, excuse me. It was a garbage truck. And they gave us some specs, and we worked with them. We designed a column for them. We sent them out a few. And this has never happened before that I'm aware of, but the columns were breaking. Our columns don't break. I mean, I'm sorry, I'll go through some of that later, but our columns don't break. What we found out is a one-man garbage truck. There's nobody in the back riding along, so the driver would go to every stop. He would get out of the truck. He would hold onto the wheel as he got down. He'd dump his garbage. He'd grab the wheel, and he'd pull himself back in. He'd do it hundreds of times every single day. I don't think anybody's columns would have held up to that, ours or anybody else's, so we said thanks, but no thanks. And that's one of the only times I can think of where we just flat out said no to somebody. You thought you knew what the name of it was. You guessed. Yeah, no, I don't think many people would know what that is, honestly. I don't know if anybody would want to know what that is, but that's another point. Can you keep going? You want to go? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we get calls every day, people wanting to know, missing something. They're saying they didn't get the package that contains the levers for the turn signals, the tilt levers, the knobs, things like that. It's missing. Well, did you open up both ends of the box? No. Open up the other end because they're in there. So make sure that you open up both ends of the box to find the missing parts. If it's a box like that, it's an IDIDIT box. We get people saying they bought a IDIDIT column at a garage sale or a swap meet, and it's all busted up. And we talked to him and said, well, it came in a white box. All of our IDIDIT columns come in a brown box, the red label IDIDIT on it. At the end, it has a Made in America sticker, has a sticker with a serial number on it, and a sticker with a part number on it. If it's a white box, it's not IDIDIT. They get mad at us because they bought it at a swap meet and they blame us for it.
Well, they were told it was ours.
They were told it was ours. Well, we're sorry, but it's not. That's pretty much on that. Just make sure you check both ends of the box for any missing parts, and brown and red.
One thing I want to add to this too. We're not quite done, are we?
No, I think so.
Okay. I didn't bring the pieces with me, but there's a lot of other columns out there now, and they're being imported in from other countries. IDIDIT columns are basically built like a tank inside, and I just want to give two examples because we were talking safety earlier, and this is a safety issue. If you are familiar with older GM columns, you know how the tilt gets loose and you can do this with the wheel and this with the wheel, and it's really sloppy. A GM column has a 1/4 inch thick plate of steel inside of it. At the top of the narrow tube, that piece of steel is kind of captured in there, just held in place, and then they bolt a casting to it. And that casting has pivots on it where your tilt goes back and forth. Those bolts come loose. And as they come loose, your wheel gets real sloppy, and guys would just tighten them back up. Well, after a while, you can only tighten it up so much because now that 1/4 inch thick plate of steel is kind of worked loose in there, and now the column's basically junk. That was the first thing that Ken noticed when he was trying to decide about building columns, some of the changes we were going to make from what was out there. We based all of our columns internally on GM components from day one. But he replaced that piece of steel with a 1/2 inch thick plate, and he welded it 360 degrees in the top of the tube. So to my knowledge, other than the garbage truck scenario, we've never had one come loose or never had one break in that part of the column. Said you were nervous. I can't talk. Anyway, that thick, and then we take the 4 bolts and we Loctite them in with red Loctite, and like I said, none of them have ever come loose. The other thing is a detent plate inside of a steering column. With a column shift column, with a normal column from Ford, Chrysler, GM, it doesn't matter. When you're in park, you can't pull it out of park unless you pull that lever back towards you and drop it down into, let's say, reverse. There's notches built inside the column to prevent you from doing that, and it's a safety. That's why they do it. You can go from reverse and you could drop it down with your finger into neutral, and then it drops into another notch inside the column. So when you're neutral, you can't move it either way without pulling the lever back. You pull the lever back into drive, you're in drive. The rest of the detents, whether it's a Turbo 350 or 700 R4, the rest of the detents are actually built into the transmission. but for safety reasons, you can't go from drive to reverse, reverse to drive, park to anything without pulling back on that lever. And that's kind of detent we put in every one of our columns. In some of the imported stuff that's out there that we have seen, some of them have no detent, some of them have it for just park. You could take your finger and just right down. Oh, well, you know, the detent's from the transmission, you don't have to worry about that. I don't buy that. The big three didn't buy that. We're not going to make one that way, so we think that it's a much better way to do it the way that all the big three designed it. They paid their engineers a lot of money to come up with stuff like that, so it's just a good safety thing that we want to make sure people know about that we're doing. Does anybody have any questions about anything else that we've talked about? Did you have a question? I saw your hand. Vic? You're good? Okay. I'm going to come up with something for the last hat. Okay. How many columns, we'll round this to the nearest 1,000. How many steering columns do you think IDIDIT's produced? Like from day one till today? It's more than 100. It's less than 500,000. It's less than 500,000. I wish we produced 1 million. Oh, it would be a lot bigger. Anyone want to throw out a guess? That's pretty close. Nobody else? You're not going to guess anyway, are you? He was 266,000, I think, roughly. If you look at the end of our column boxes, there's a serial number on it. That's also how many columns we built. So we have over 1,000 part numbers now. Now, some of those we might sell 2 or 3 a year. You know, again, small group, but I want to talk about this a little bit too. Started out building universal columns. I think the first retrofit we did was probably a Tri-5 Chevy, probably a 57. If you guys have worked on cars at all, we had a 57 Chevy in our shop. We built the car or the column right off the car. We know it fits, no problem. Then you sell one to the next guy and he says, "Oh, this column's too short." You sell the same column to the next guy, he says, "Oh, this column's too long." 57s are a good example because they were built in 4 different factories around the country, and they actually use 2 different frames on them. 4 doors, 2 doors, different versions. It's really tough building retrofit columns for old cars. You get newer cars, it's a little easier. Camaros, that's pretty straightforward. It just bolts in, things like that. We try really hard to make sure our columns fit and bolt in the way they're supposed to. Like George was saying, our retrofits, we try and include floor mounts now whenever we can. We try and reuse any original mounting hardware that we can. But some of these guys, like I said, the guy will call up. 55s and 6s might even be worse. I don't know, with the column shift. A real popular thing to do with a 55, 56, or 7 Chevy was put a 605 power steering box in it. Everybody and their brother did that. So for that reason, we had to make the columns really short, because by the time you put the rag joint on your steering box, it's about that far from the firewall. So the columns would just come through the firewall and attach to it. Any retrofit that we do, we have had the car in the shop and we built the column right off of the vehicle. So we know it fits. The other thing about like a 57, I was thinking about that today. They're now 57 years old. I know that because I was born that same year. So who knows what's happened to that car in all those years. The guy will swear it's perfectly straight, just like it was. It came out of the factory. Nothing's happened. I'm sorry, it's 57 years old. I'm not perfectly straight anymore. I'm sure the car isn't either. So there's a lot of things out there that happen to it. A good example is the guy that calls up and says, you know, my column doesn't fit. Oh, well, yeah, I put a different firewall in the car. Well, I'm sorry. We assumed that the car is stock when we sold you the car. We have no way of knowing that. So there's a lot of things like that we run into. We've pretty much run down to it. You guys haven't asked very many questions.